great on the old terms. The same thing is happening in Europe, in which the Islamic threat consists in people who want to maintain their own autonomous culture within the society. Canada's a country with many different immigrant groups. How does that fit in the picture of the
I mean, what you really ask, I mean, I can tell you how it is, and I can tell you what the myth is. If you want to know how it's going to turn out, let's talk in 25 years, and please God we'll be alive and still compos mentis, and we'll be able to think about these things. I said at the outset, I'm a historian. I can be responsible for what I say about the past, but the future, your guess is as good as mine. If the past is any guide, then Hispanics in the U.S., and Muslims in Europe, if they're going to live there, and if they don't become the majority, are going to have to conform to what the local norms are in terms of language and culture. And moreover, they will want to. Because if you're going to be Attorney General of the U.S., as a Hispanic is right now, I think he's still there, isn't he, in office? Yeah. Then, you know, you have to operate the way the majority operates. You can't speak Spanish as Attorney General.
I don't want to turn this into a debate, but that's precisely what's not happening. And when Huntington talks about in Who We Are, what's happening to the United States, he's talking about the fact that the Spanish have not adopted the work norms, the ethical norms of the majority culture.
Give them a chance. A lot of them just came over the border as wetbacks from Mexico.
Well, it's
so you have to wait. You know, Samuel Huntington is a scaremonger. And maybe he's right. I don't know. But we have to give it enough time to find out if this happens. Traditionally, nobody has been successful in the U.S. in maintaining a separate culture and a separate language. They haven't. It's happened for one generation, sometimes a generation and a half, and then it disappears. You know, Yiddish newspapers at one time sold more copies per day in New York than the largest circulation English language paper. Today there isn't a Yiddish daily left. And the Yiddish papers held out better than the Italian papers or the Portuguese papers or the Spanish papers or anybody else. Right? So, you know, we have to wait and see. At one time, Jews didn't intermarry with anybody else. Today, they have a very high intermarriage rate in the U.S. So, yeah, we don't know where it's going. Traditionally, it's been impossible in the U.S. to have a separate culture. And I think that Canada is moving in that direction. Also, although French language and French culture are not going to disappear all that quickly, I mean, it may remain possible to have two, but it's not going to be possible to have 10 or 15.
Next one is Dov.
Some 30 years ago, a daughter of friends of mine married the grandson of Lester Pearson. She came from an Orthodox family in Toronto. Now I wonder what happened to the intermarriage rate among Jewish youth in Canada over the past few years, and whether you have already the birthright program in Canada, like you have in the United States, and whether there was a follow-up on the results, whether they were effective or not in preserving Jewishness among those who have been visiting here.
Okay, the follow-up, I mean, I know the follow-up existed. I don't know what the results, well, I don't know whether they've done any results. But in terms of the intermarriage rate in Canada, it has zoomed the way it has in the U.S., although it is less high, as you would expect, because Canada is usually slower along the integration, assimilation, whatever you want to call it, acculturation. You know, assimilation is what you call it if you hate it. Acculturation is what you call it if it's okay. So Canada is not as far along as the U.S., partly for time reasons, for chronological reasons, because Jews came to Canada. A larger percentage of Canadian Jews is of more recent origin than American Jews. Let's put it absolutely carefully. Here, and because Canada itself, up until now, has been a more conservative society, which sort of kept people, you know, kind of doing the things their parents did. But Canada isn't so conservative these days. I mean, we're, again, just to come back to the gay marriage issue, I mean, Canada is way ahead of the U.S., and on other social issues also, the country is now much less conservative than seems to be the trend elsewhere, and especially in the U.S. So what that will mean for the future, I don't know, but certainly there is lots of intermarriage. Birthright, yes, it's been hugely successful in Canada. In fact, during the Intifada, when birthright registrations fell off radically in the U.S., they did not fall off radically in Canada, and in fact, Canadians took up the places of many Americans. It's the fate of Canada. When the U.S. pulls out, they finally get a little space to move, and so more Canadians get into the birthright program than before. It's been hugely successful, and for the same reasons that it has been successful elsewhere. And we can hope that the rug doesn't get pulled out from under it, as is threatened by the Israeli government and by the Jewish communities that have been funding it in the U.S. and Canada as well.
In what sense do you say it is successful?
Successful in the studies there, what I have seen of it. Actually, I have an article, I'm sorry it's not in front of me now, but that shows that in the follow-up that's been done, that people who've been on birthright tend to affiliate more with the Jewish community. They tend to have more Jewish friends. Some of them are into Jewish learning and doing things that others who haven't been on the program are not doing. Is it going to save the Jewish world? Well, every little bit saves the Jewish world a little bit. And so I think we can say that it's been a very important, very innovative program. And I should say that one of the three big-time founders and funders of Birthright was Charles Bronfman, who, even though he lives in New York, I assume still has a Canadian heart. And made all of his money in Canada anyway, or most of it, so.
Yeah, Mr. Melman, then afterwards Victor.
My question has been answered, thank you.
Victor, and afterwards Mr. Spessner.
Canadian Jewry, unlike most groups of Jews in the world, has been living with a big brother, a gigantic brother in the United States. To what degree and in what form do you say the influence, the model, the power of American Jewry directs, encourages, discourages Canadian Jewry as it sort of moves into the vague area we call tomorrow?
I think the real answer would be yes. In the sense that, it does all those things. I mean, I would say going to bed every night with an elephant is a dangerous enterprise and not always a comfortable one. But, sometimes the elephant doesn't roll over on you and essentially helps you to do good things and maybe, gets food in the trunk that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. And so, it's okay, but it's also not so easy. So there's no question that Canadian Jews are often pulled in the direction of the U.S., sometimes because Canadian Jewry is too small to have certain kinds of institutions. We don't have a regular rabbinical seminary, for instance. We've got some yeshivas that produce rabbis, but no branch of Judaism, not the conservative, the Reform, or the Orthodox, have been able to establish a regular modern seminary. There just aren't enough Jews for that sort of thing. And there are other institutions that we could point to that, you can't have if you don't have a larger number of people. So the U.S. is overwhelming in some ways. It's overpowering in some ways, and it's sometimes helpful and leads the way in other ways. So what can you say? In terms of Zionism, Canada's been way ahead of the U.S. in terms of Zionist affiliation, in terms of per capita giving, in terms of all kinds of things. So, sometimes Canada goes its own way and does so well, and sometimes it can't. And there it is, and I expect that that's the way it will be in the future too.
Please, and then Chaim Assis.
Thank you. I grew up as an honorary Protestant. I didn't know that until I came on Aliyah and had to present my credentials to the Ministry of Education here. But my certificate reads, as a graduate of and of the Protestant faith. Anyhow, it took a long time to fix that up. But that's not the question. In the 70s, there was a great influx of Moroccan Jews and North African Jews into Montreal. And that seemed to create a schism almost in the Jewish community. The Moroccans built their own schools, separated themselves totally. I remember it was even difficult to collect money for Israel from the Moroccan Jews. They had their own system. How has that affected the Jewish community?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, we also had some Moroccans in Toronto, although the ones in Toronto are generally Spanish-speaking, whereas the French-speaking ones ended up in Montreal. We got Francophones too, but much more of the Spanish community came to Toronto than elsewhere. And they've been an interesting influence, for decades. The highest Jewish intermarriage rate in Canada was Moroccan Jews intermarrying with French Canadians, which had been kind of unthinkable before. I mean, French Canadians usually Jews thought of as lower social status, so that was one inhibitor, and another just had to do with
They wouldn't have us.
with religious prejudice on their side, but on our side too. I mean, it was on both sides. That was kind of unthinkable. I think that's sort of petered out now, and they have integrated much more successfully into the Jewish community. Partly, they were the good guys in a Quebec where speaking French was absolutely essential. They did it. So they, in a way, were able to kosher the rest of the community by, being a sector that fit in to Francophone Quebec, a Francophone society, much better than most other Jews could do. By now, I think everybody pretty much living in Quebec is comfortable functioning in French if they have to, and in the workplace, and you can get along in show without French, as I can testify from having been there, but you can't really get along, I don't think, in Quebec society any longer, being monolingually English. And on the other side, the community has become more accepting for all kinds of, the barriers were on both sides.
Yes.
I remember being in Montreal, and I was sitting in the Y having lunch at the snack bar, and I heard two people sitting next to me, and one said, "Well, she never goes in the pool anymore because it's all the Moroccan Jews swim in the pool and they urinate in it, and I can't swim in there any longer." So that I assume this was. She had no more evidence of this fact. In fact, no evidence of it whatsoever, but this was part of the myth of, the dirty Moroccans or whatever were culturally inferior and behaved themselves poorly and everything else. So there were barriers on both sides to integration. I think a lot of that has now broken down, and it's broken down partly because in Quebec it was so important to speak French, and they did it. And they've got their own institutions now of, set up schools and participate in the community at large. And I don't know if it's exactly one big happy family, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. And I think that they've proved to be politically valuable as far as the Jewish community is concerned. And I think now, as the Jewish community itself became more tolerant and more accepting of difference, socially acceptable.
Have they acted as the bridge that we thought they would? We thought they would be a bridge between the French Canadians and the Jews. And have they been a bridge?
You're dealing with new immigrants for one thing, so it's a little hard in some ways. But I think some of them have been a bridge, and you've had some figures from the community who have even achieved some cultural significance. And Naïm Kakan, for instance, was a significant writer in French. But you've got some academics who function in the French world, at UQAM and other Francophone universities, UDM. So I think so. I mean, are they exactly the bridge that anybody, are they the kind of bridge that made it possible to be monolingual in English and maintain the old style of life in the New Quebec? No. But that, I think, that was a non-starter.
May I add 2
Thank you.
points on these issues?
In order, please. Chaim,
Yeah.
and then you get the last
You
question.
talked about the Muslims in Europe. You didn't speak at all about the Muslims in Canada. I saw in Quebec, in Montreal, that there are very, very many Muslims and Arabs. I'm not speaking only about the Lebanese who integrated better than the others, but there are Palestinians and North Africans who are very active against Israel. We have seen a very alarming film about what happened in Concordia campus. And do you think that there is a problem similar to the problem of the Muslims in the suburbs of Paris or other places in Europe?
I suppose so. Which is to say, they're there. They are there in force, and some of them are acculturating and will, want to be Canadian, whatever that means, and some of them don't. They're there, they're there to play their own game, which I don't know. I mean, for an advocate of multiculturalism, which I just tried to be, I would have to say that's their right. But I think if they mean by that, beating up Jews or preventing free speech or things like that, my guess is that will not go down in the long term. Concordia, that whole event was, it was kind of scary. I could say a lot about it because I think in some ways it was handled badly all around. The Jewish students handled it without much thought in their invitation to Netanyahu and the way it was set up. The university didn't think about it very much beforehand and didn't ensure that it would go down well. And the Arab students were clearly out for blood. And not literally, killing them, I don't think, but they were out to make as much of a mess as they could. And they succeeded because the other sides hadn't given much thought to what was going on. Everybody sort of cleaned up the act since then. I don't know whether the Palestinian advocates have cleaned up theirs. The university certainly has. It's had a Jewish president now for a number of years. I don't envy him his task, having to deal with all these Fred Lowy. Although he's now, I think, either out of office or leaving. I think there's some considerably more care now thought into. We've had the same on your campus. There are outspoken, strong Palestinian advocates of their cause and who don't have any use for Israel whatsoever and don't believe in any of the sort of free speech norms. But I must say, Rachel could tell you more about this because she's been writing about it at York University, and there are problems on all sides of this. But is the problem going to persist? I'd put my money on it.
Okay, Dolph,
I'd like to add a few points, empirical points, about this question of the young lady. In the first place, when Algeria became independent, there were 150 Jewish professors in the University of Algiers. Not one of them moved to Israel. They all went to France and to Quebec. Generally speaking, migration is a selective process, and the elites of the North African Jewry moved not to Israel, but to France and to Canada. Therefore, they were already Francophones before they came to Canada, and therefore the rate of intermarriage there was higher than that of the previous Jewish population. And the same was true also of the North African immigrants to France itself, where the rate of intermarriage was quite high, compared to, at the time, the rate of intermarriage in other European countries by Jews. Now, you mentioned that Erwin Cutler has an Israeli wife. She spent a few years in Israel. She is North African by origin. Another point, in Hamilton,
She's Iraqi.
Right, Iraqi, right, yeah. Ariella is Iraqi, yeah, right. And in recent years, rabbinical
I don't think she would appreciate being called an Iraqi. But she
No,
thinks
she's a good
it's
friend.
Israeli.
She's a good friend of my wife, so I mean, it's
Yes, I
not.
know her as well. I'm
Okay.
not speaking in
Now, in recent years, a rabbinical seminary has been established in Hamilton, Canada. For your information.
Well, I have a lot of information. I told you there are yeshivas around for the training of generally Haredi rabbis, but there are no modern seminaries along the line of RITZ or the Jewish Theological Seminary or the Hebrew College. That's what I said. That's what is the case.
Okay, concluding remarks, Ambassador Danival.
No, just a few precision to what you asked. The last president, or the chairman of the Jewish Federation of Montreal, is a Moroccan, Abid Paul. Yes, that's me. Second thing, among the young Moroccan Jews in Montreal, most of them now are studying at English universities and not French universities. Most of them. To McGill or to New York because you have more opportunity and the level is higher.
Wonderful. That's the integration that Michael was saying. That it's sort of
Member of Parliament. Sada, Member of Parliament.
That's a very good.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Remains to me to wish you a Chag Sameach. As you have seen, we had to cancel Rabbi Dr. Hertzvi Weinreb's lecture because his mother passed away, so he's not coming to Israel.